Section 3.3 Hovering over an object. Unity has embedded listeners for defining the various mouse actions on a scene object, such as hovering, clicking, dragging, etc. For the configuration of hovering over an object, we equip our mouse UI MonoBehavior class with the onMouseOver and onMouseExit listeners, which are being triggered when the mouse cursor is hovering over the territory defined by the collider of a 3D scene object and when exiting the latter, respectively. Specifically, we use a static variable of GameObject type in mouse UI called objectHoveringOver, initialized as null in mouse UI start, which is being set to the current GameObject in onMouseOver, that is, when the mouse is inside the object's territory, and set back to null in onMouseExit, that is, when the mouse is exiting the object's territory, provided that the object has not been labeled as non-interactable, that is, it is not a lab bench. Nevertheless, in onMouseOver, we also assign our static global string variable text4tooltip with the value of the non-static global string variable user-friendly name, which, as we have seen, contains the object's user-friendly name which corresponds to its label. Text4tooltip variable is going to be useful in displaying the tooltip, as we shall see in the next section. Section 3.3.1 Description Tooltip. The tooltip image exists in the UI tooltip PNG file in the /assets/resources folder of our Unity project. Before anything else, we must set its texture type in the inspector to be sprite. So, we choose tooltip and we select sprite 2D and UI as its texture type and we press apply. In order now to create the description tooltip, we first declare several static global variables in mouse UI MonoBehavior class. Then we initialize them in the start function. Tooltip middle x and tooltip middle y store the relative x and y coordinates of the center of the tooltip, while size x and size y store the tooltip's width and height respectively. Later on, we will explain what those particular numerical values mean. On its behalf, tooltip BG, short for tooltip background, is of texture 2D type and stores the PNG file of the tooltip's image. We also need to declare a static global variable of event type, namely occurrence, for saving the current mouse position. Then, in the static :GUI function of mouse UI, we add some lines. Mouse UI's :GUI static function, which is being called by Egos controllers on GUI at every time frame, simply checks whether object hovering over variable is not null, meaning the cursor is indeed hovering over an object, and whether this object's label is not non-interactable, meaning it is not a bench but an actual interactable object. If the check comes out true, the display tooltip function is called. As for the display tooltip function itself, it is another static function which creates a rectangular tooltip with a text in yellow fonts of size 16 and middle center anchoring, as well as a semi-transparent background. For the values of tooltip middle x, tooltip middle y, size x and size y that we used in the start function, the created tooltip is placed 50 pixels above the current cursor position, having a horizontal size of 240 pixels and a center alignment with respect to the cursor. As for the display text, that is no other than the user-friendly name of the object that has been stored in the text4tooltip variable. In short, this code displays the tooltip with a user-friendly description over an object that is being hovered over with a mouse and hides it as soon as the hovering stops. Now, Let's test our code for the microscope's revolving nosepiece, to which we have attached the mouse UI script as component and chosen revolving nosepiece as its label, which is also its user-friendly name. We press play, and now we move towards the microscope, and now we hover over the revolving nosepiece, and we see that the tooltip with the revolving nosepiece user-friendly description appears. And as soon as we stop hovering over it, the tooltip disappears. Section 3.3.2 Setting the vicinity of objects. In order for our simulation to be realistic, we would like the tooltip to appear over an object only when Ego is in close proximity to the latter. This can be achieved by calculating the distance between the target object and the main camera of the game, which is a child of Ego game object, and allowing the tooltip to appear when the distance is less than a predefined limit. Thus, in the mouse UI monobehavior, we first declare a static global variable of camera type, main camera. In the start function, we set our main camera variable to be a reference to the game's main camera. We then declare a global 3D vector variable, vector distance from camera, which, as its name suggests, stores the vector distance of the target object from the camera, as well as a float constant minimum distance for interaction equal to 2, which defines the minimum distance that an object can be interactable, including being hoverable by the mouse. What is left is to add two new lines in the beginning of the if clause in our onMouseOver function. With this addition, we calculate the Euclidean magnitude of the current vector distance between Ego and the target object and secure that the tooltip is to be shown only if the latter is less than the minimum distance defined by us. Now, let's test our code, again for the revolving nosepiece. We try to hover over the revolving nosepiece, but we see no tooltip. But as we approach towards the microscope and the distance becomes smaller, we see that the tooltip appears. So our code works fine.